Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker, so dim. The lights maybe turn on, a fan get cozy, but not too cozy, because tonight you are not just watching history, you are living it, and not the fun kind with laurel wreaths and toga parties. No, you're waking up as a slave in a Roman lead mine, sometime in the 1st century CE. Congratulations. Your alarm clock is the wet cough of the man who slept next to you and didn't survive the night. The air you're breathing tastes like rust mold and the inside of a corpse, which is fair because there is probably one within 5 feet of you. Your bed is the floor, which is really just a depression in the rock, where water, sweat and regret have pooled, and the warmth you feel isn't sunlight, but the combined body heat of 40 other unwashed men pressed together in a low, dark tunnel, barely high enough to sit up in. You try to stretch, but your muscles scream from yesterday's shift and your joints crack like dry twigs. Someone groans nearby and you feel a sharp elbow jab your side because you were in their spot. As if anyone can claim ownership over this particular slice of hell. Your first conscious thought is that you didn't die in your sleep, which tragically means you now have to endure another full Roman workday. And the second thought is that your teeth hurt again, maybe from grinding them, or maybe from whatever's growing in your gums. But there's no mirror to check, and even if there were, your reflection would probably run from itself above you, somewhere far off. A bell clangs once hollow and merciless, and just like that, your day has officially begun. You crawl over a pair of legs that don't move, and tell yourself they're just sleeping, even though you know they're not. Your knees slip on damp stone as you make your way toward the tunnel mouth, where grey light bleeds in like a tired ghost. Your stomach growls, but you ignore it because breakfast isn't a thing here, unless you count chewing on your tongue to distract yourself from hunger. The overseer stands at the entrance with his whip, his face pockmarked and bored. He doesn't even look at you as he starts barking names. Your name isn't really yours anymore. It's a sound they shout when they want you to work or punish you, and when it's shouted now, you stumble forward like livestock. Someone throws a cracked wooden bucket at your feet and points deeper into the mine. You pick it up with hands that shake slightly from whatever poison lives in your blood now, and you step into the shaft where the ceiling lowers, the light dies, and your breath begins to labor from the weight of the air. The rock walls are slick with condensation, the floor uneven and cruel. You pass someone already swinging a pick in total darkness, muttering to himself in a language you don't understand. Or maybe he's just praying. Not that it matters, because the gods stopped answering prayers down here a long time ago, if they ever listened in the first place. Your bare feet crunch over gravel and rat bones, and already your lungs burn from the dust, from the lead particles floating unseen entering your body, with every breath, every cough, every sigh. And as you make your way to your assigned tunnel, you tell yourself it's just one day. You just have to survive one more day. But you've been saying that for weeks now. And every time you say it, it sounds less like hope and more like a cruel joke. And the worst part is, you haven't even picked up your pickaxe yet. You hear the clang of iron against stone long before you reach your station, a sound that drills into your skull and promises nothing but repetition, the same sound that filled yesterday and the day before, and will fill every single one until you die or disappear, or finally become too broken to lift your arms. And maybe that's the goal here, not to kill you outright, but to grind you down like ore, slow and steady, until nothing recognizable remains. Your feet slip on a smear of slime, and you catch yourself against the wall, your hand coming away with something black under your nails, and you don't ask what it is, because questions don't get answered here, they get punished. And curiosity is just another path to pain. Someone ahead of you collapses knees, buckling like a puppet with its strings cut. And the overseer, same one every day, like he was forged out of cruelty itself, doesn't blink, doesn't stop. He just steps over the body and keeps shouting orders like the man is part of the floor now. And maybe he is, maybe you will be too. Your assigned shaft is even darker than the main tunnel, a long throat of stone that swallows what little light remains. And when you step inside, it's like the world has gone blind. Your eyes strain, but there's nothing to see except the flicker of a torch wedged into a crack 20 feet ahead. Barely enough glow to find your footing, and definitely not enough to see the jagged rocks that wait to slice your legs open when you stumble, which you will, because your body is already tired, already aching, already wondering how much longer it can keep pretending. It's still human. You find your pickaxe where you left it yesterday, half buried in sludge, and your fingers wrap around the wooden shaft like it's a lifeline. Which is absurd, because it's the exact opposite. It's the weapon they gave you to murder yourself with stroke by stroke, swing by swing. And still you lift it, raise it high, and bring it down against the wall. Sparks fly, and your shoulders jolt, and your wrists sing with pain. But you do it again, because that's the job. That's the day, that's all there is. You chip at the wall as if digging could ever lead to freedom. But the only thing waiting on the other side is more rock, more dust, more lead, and the occasional pocket of foul air that smells like the inside of a corpse. You pause only when your fingers go numb, when your vision swims, when you need to close your eyes and pretend just for a second that you're anywhere else. Not even somewhere good, just somewhere you can breathe without coughing up pieces of your own lungs. And then the torch sputters behind you, and you know the shift is nowhere near over. You swing again, and this time the pickaxe bounces wrong, and your knuckles slam into the wall. Blood spills, but you don't shout. You don't react because drawing attention is worse than injury. Pain is temporary, but punishment is personal. And right now you're just trying to make it to the mid-shift count. Not because you believe you'll be let out or fed, but because it's the only signal you're still alive, still tethered to a clock that someone else controls. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get lucky and the overseer will forget your name for 5 whole minutes. But you know he won't, you know. He'll remember because he always does. Time becomes a smudge, a blur smeared across your brain, like soot across a cracked wall, and you stop pretending to track it. There's no sun down here, no shadows to follow, only the slow ache of your body and the throb in your temples to mark the hours, if you can call them that. Your breath comes in short, sharp pulls now, each inhale coated in dust. So fine it feels like powdered bone. And maybe it is. You wouldn't be surprised if this mine was built on a graveyard or, more likely, just became one. You pause for a second, lean on your pickaxe, and that's your first mistake. The second one is thinking you had time to rest, because from the corner of the shaft comes the crunch of sandals on gravel. A sound that means bad news. A sound that means someone with power, or worse, a whip is coming. And your back stiffens automatically, like it's been trained to flinch before pain arrives. Which it has. The overseer steps into view and squints through the dark, like a vulture with a clipboard, except less charming. And he doesn't say a word, just points not at you directly, but at the floor behind you, and you don't need to look to know what's there. It's the new kid, the one who was brought in 3 days ago, barely more than a boy. Probably a runaway or a debt slave, or just someone unlucky enough to be sold for a few silver coins and a nod and he's not moving. Hasn't been for a while now. And you think you heard him coughing earlier, deep and wet like something tearing loose inside. And now he's still and cold and quiet. The overseer doesn't ask if he's dead, doesn't care, just mutters something about inefficiency and lost labor, and calls for someone else to drag the body out, which they do. One of the older slaves who stopped caring years ago, probably before you got here, probably before he even remembered his own name. And then the boy is gone, hauled off like trash. And you don't say anything because saying anything is dangerous, because silence is the safest language you know now. So you go back to swinging because that's the only thing expected of you. And not swinging means suspicion, and suspicion means pain. And there's enough of that already. Your hands are blistered, your shoulders burn, and every movement makes your spine feel like it's grinding into sand. But you keep going, because this is the job, this is the rhythm. And if you break the rhythm, you break the rule. And if you break the rule, you get broken too. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic sense, but literally. Ribs, fingers, skull, whatever they feel like smashing to make a point. And the worst part isn't the pain. It's the indifference, the way they do it, like swatting a fly, like it's routine because it is, because this place eats people like you for breakfast and spits out bones for lunch. And as the tunnel grows hotter, more claustrophobic, more alive with the stink of sweat and rot and resignation, you wonder how much of you is still you, how much lead is in your blood now, how much despair in your lungs, how many pieces of yourself you've traded just to survive the morning. And somewhere in the distance another bell clangs, maybe a signal, maybe a joke, maybe just a reminder that time exists only to mock you. And you realize you've made it to midday, if you can call this progress, and you tell yourself again the lie you always whisper. Just make it through today, just today. But you already know tomorrow is waiting, and it doesn't care if you're ready. You thought the morning was bad, but here comes the real comedy, your break. If you can even call it that, a generous 10 minutes of not actively swinging a pickaxe while your lungs try to remember what breathing used to feel like before they were converted into miniature lead furnaces. You're shuffled like livestock toward the edge of the shaft, where the rock widens into what might generously be called a common space. Though there's nothing common about it, except the shared suffering, and the overpowering scent of stale sweat, open wounds and despair. You collapse against the wall and pretend your legs don't feel like they've been swapped out for wet rope. There's no talking, not because it's forbidden, but because no one has the energy. And why waste breath on words when every exhale tastes like minerals and regrets your fingers tremble as you reach for your meal, which is a term the Romans really abused, because what you're handed is less food and more insult. Half a crust of stale barley bread, so hard you could sand wood with it, and a ladle of pottage so thin it looks like dirty rainwater. With dreams of being soup, you chew the crust like it wronged your family, each bite releasing a cloud of dry crumbs that lodge in your throat, and when you finally manage to swallow, your body treats it like a threat rather than nourishment. The pottage isn't much better, gritty and lukewarm and laced with some herb that might be flavor or might be fungus. Who knows? No one asks questions here unless they want to learn what Roman sarcasm feels like when it's applied with a club. Still you eat because your body demands it, even if your soul would prefer to file a complaint and expire with a little dignity. Someone to your left lets out a long rattling cough, and everyone subtly shifts away, not because they care, but because sickness here spreads like spilled oil, quiet and inevitable. You sip the rest of your pottage as slowly as you can, trying to trick your stomach into thinking it's full, trying to savor the moment, even though it tastes like boiled disappointment. And then just as your jaw starts to remember how chewing works, the bell clangs again, sharp and smug, because rest is never really rest, just a countdown to more suffering. You ride, knees popping, spine creaking, and you don't even notice the pain anymore. It's background noise like the buzz of insects or the constant voice in your head, reminding you that this isn't a nightmare, that you're not going to wake up in your bed with soft sheets and clean air, and that stupid podcast you fell asleep to. This is real. This is every day. And the worst part is how quickly it all becomes normal, how the body adjusts to torment and the brain files it under routine. You shuffle back into the tunnel, back to your station, and the only thing you can think about is how badly you want water that doesn't taste like rust and rat droppings, how badly you want to feel the sun on your skin without it burning through your bones. But those are luxury thoughts, modern thoughts, and you're not allowed those anymore. You traded them in the moment, Someone slapped a chain on your wrist and called you property. The overseer shouts something about speed efficiency, quotas, as if anyone down here gives a damn about numbers. You swing your pickaxe and pretend you're somewhere else. But the walls don't let you forget. They echo every breath, every grunt, every muffled sob. And as the day grinds forward, so do you. Because that's the only direction they've left you. The moment you re-enter the shaft, the air hits you like a punishment. Thicker, now hotter, more aggressive. As if the mine itself resents your brief escape and wants to remind you that hope is a privilege. You're not allowed to carry in here. The light from the torch you passed on the way out has burned lower, casting long shadows that stretch and twitch, like they're trying to crawl away from the walls, and you wonder if you could do the same. If you could somehow slither out through a crack in the rock and vanish into a world that doesn't smell like decay and despair. But then you feel the weight of the pickaxe in your hand, the sharp ache in your lower back, and you remember you're not going anywhere. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever, because this isn't just a job. It's a sentence and nobody survives it. They just get slower, smaller, and eventually replace someone ahead of you is already swinging his rhythm, mechanical, his eyes hollow, and you don't know his name, because names are like luxuries down here, useful only if someone expects you to live long enough to matter. You take your place beside him and start chipping away at the rock again, not because you want to, but because stopping isn't an option, and for a while, your world becomes three things: swing, breathe, sweat, until that too becomes exhausting and you start adding. Blink and swallow, and try not to collapse. Your skin itches constantly, a side effect of either the lice, or the mold, or the fact that you haven't properly washed in weeks, maybe months. The trick is not to scratch too hard, or you'll open a wound, and wounds down here are like lottery tickets, except the prize is infection, and a slow, feverish death in the corner. While everyone pretends not to notice the man next to you mutters something in a language you don't understand. Something that might be a prayer or a curse, or just the sound of his sanity, finally packing its bags and leaving, and you find yourself wondering if yours is still around, or if it left during your first week quietly without saying goodbye. The rock gives slightly, and you hear the echo of your own pick reverberate through the tunnel, like a heartbeat sharp and rhythmic. And somewhere deep in your chest, you register pride, which is horrifying because why would you feel proud of this? Of all things, of helping to dig out metal that will be smelted into pipes and coins and water lines. You'll never see helping build an empire that will never remember your name. And yet, here you are hoping the overseer notices your productivity, so you might get a slightly less rotted heel of bread tonight, or a corner to sleep in. That isn't directly under the drip of whatever foul liquid leaks from the upper chamber. And that's the brilliance of the system, isn't it? How it teaches you to crave the smallest crumbs of mercy. How it turns scraps into treasures and survival into victory. A small rock slide down the tunnel interrupts your thoughts, and you flinch instinctively, heart pounding, because even though you're surrounded by death all day, the idea of dying under 20 tons of screaming stone still manages to feel fresh, exciting even. But it was just loose debris, no screams, no chaos. Just a reminder that the mountain could crush you any time, and nobody would dig you out. They'd just mark your spot with a smear of ash and move on your fingers, cramp your shoulders, throb, and yet you keep going, not because you're brave or strong or noble, but because you don't know what else to do, because stopping would mean thinking. And thinking is the last thing you want in a place where all the thoughts lead to the same conclusion. You're not going to make it out of here. Not whole, not sane, not you. The afternoon creeps in without warning. Not that you can tell from inside this stone throat of a workplace because the sun is a myth down here. A bedtime story for people who still get to see color. And all you know is that your muscles are screaming in a slightly higher pitch than before, and the light from the single torch has started to flicker. like it's losing the will to live, which is relatable, honestly. You shift your grip on the pickaxe. Try to ignore the split on your palm that's reopened and started to smear blood down the handle. And you don't stop, not even to wipe it off, because time is counted in blows, not in breaths, and the rhythm is the only thing keeping you from losing it completely. One swing for the Romans, one swing for the rats, one swing for whatever god is watching this mess and laughing into his toga. And the rock doesn't care about your suffering. It doesn't move faster just because you're dying slower. It stays indifferent and immovable and sharp. A perfect metaphor for everything outside your control. And as the dust thickens and your lungs start to burn, you begin to think about water. Not the sludge they give you in a cracked pottery bowl twice a day that tastes like metal and disease, but real water. Cold water, water, with no floaties, maybe even ice. Remember ice, remember snow, remember the world. Before you got dragged down into this limestone mausoleum of ambition and empire. You blink and the motion sends sweat into your eyes. It stings and you rub at your face with the back of your arm and smear it across your skin. Now a mixture of grime and snot and blood and old sadness. And then there's a noise behind you, sharp and sudden. And before you can react, someone is yelling. It's not the overseer this time, but one of the slaves, the older one with the twisted leg, who usually doesn't say anything. He's shouting in broken Latin, pointing to the wall. And you realize too late what he's trying to say, because a crack is splitting across the ceiling above him, and you don't even finish your thought before the whole thing gives way. Not a full collapse, just a punishment-sized landslide, the gods showing they can still party when they want to. And you flinch backward as the dust explodes into the air, covering everything in silence for a second too long, and when it clears, he's gone just like that. 1 second shouting the next, entombed. And nobody moves. Not even the overseer, who finally shows up and gives the heap of rubble a long look before muttering something about inefficiency again and turning away. And you hate how unsurprised you feel, how normal it is that a man can vanish in front of you. And the world keeps going like this. Place eats people and digests them without burping. Like grief is too expensive to afford and you keep working. Because what else are you going to do? Pray, cry, scream. No one listens. No one cares. And besides, the quota hasn't been met. And you know that because the whip cracks twice down the tunnel and everyone flinches in sync, and you almost laugh because at this point, it's choreographed, like you're all in some perverse stage play where the audience is just the walls watching silently as the car slowly dies off. Your arms are lead. Your fingers cramp every few minutes, and the only thing that breaks the monotony is the memory of the boy who collapsed yesterday, the one they dragged out like garbage, and you wonder how long it takes to forget your own name. How many more swings until you stop counting them? How long until you stop caring if the shaft collapses or not? Because you're already buried or really just waiting for the rock to finish the job. Still standing, impressive. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just reflex now. Like a corpse rigged with strings jerking into motion every time the overseer grunts or a pickaxe hits stone too close to your ear, but you're moving somehow, dragging your aching body deeper into the mine. Because that's what you do. Because stopping means attention. And attention here is a form of violence. Not recognition, not compassion. Just more eyes on you and more reasons to bleed. And as you trudge forward, the heat thickens. Not like the heat outside that bakes your skin and makes the world shimmer, but something heavier, damp and close and sticky, like breathing through wet wool soaked in metal. And your skin itches, not just from the sweat or the filth, or the hundreds of flea bites that form constellations across your legs, but from something deeper, something crawling under the surface. Something that no amount of scratching fixes though. That doesn't stop you from trying your fingers, drag across your scalp, and come away with flakes of skin, clumps of hair. and what might be lice, but honestly, you've stopped keeping count. You gave up on clean weeks ago, gave up on healthy, when the scabs on your arms started resembling artwork, gave up on whole when you noticed the grey tinge in your fingernails that no amount of spit or sand could scrub away. Lead poisoning, you've heard whispers of it in every language and every dialect spoken. By the miserable mosaic of prisoners down here, they call it different names, sweet death, silent rot, the Roman kiss, but it all means the same thing. Your body is turning against you, molecule by molecule, and you're just along for the ride. Dizzy more often than not, lightheaded from swinging too long without breathing right, and your teeth hurt too. A dull, persistent ache that spreads into your jaw and up behind your eyes, and maybe it's from clenching, or maybe the rot's gotten into your gums too. You wouldn't be the first. There's a man 3 tunnels over who lost half his teeth last week. Just woke up spitting blood and molars like his mouth had declared mutiny, and the only thing they gave him was a rag to bite down on, and a slap for dripping too much onto the stone. But the real kicker isn't the pain, it's the smell. That iron-rich sour rot smell that never leaves, clings to your skin, your hair, your mouth. Even when you try to pretend it's just your imagination, even when you close your eyes and beg your brain to picture anything else, it still crawls up your nose and reminds you, no, this is real. This is what decay smells like. When it's personal, and the clothing, if you can still call it that, is no help either. Your tunic is nothing more than a collection of holes, loosely bound by threads that used to be fabric, stiff with grime, stiff with sweat, stiff with things you don't name, because naming them makes them real, and your feet are wrapped in rags that were already rotting when someone else wore them last year. Maybe 2 years ago, who knows? Time down here stretches and folds and loses its shape like wet parchment, and you walk on them anyway, because bare feet mean splinters and stones, and infections that climb your legs like vines. You've seen it, the dark streaks that start at the ankle and snake upward until the fever sets in, and the mind drifts and the breathing slows, and then that person just stops, and someone else takes their pickaxe and their corner of the tunnel, and the cycle continues. Because no one gets clean, no one gets healed, no one gets out, and the only thing that surprises you anymore is that your hands still work, that your legs still move, that your eyes still blink through the blur of sweat and dust and grief. And somewhere in the back of your skull, a small voice. You've mostly muted whispers that you're not really surviving, you're just rotting slower than everyone else. The funny thing is, you used to think of health as this vague checklist of vitamins and hydration, and 8 hours of sleep, and maybe stretching once in a while, if you were feeling ambitious back when you had weekends and skin that wasn't a battlefield, and lungs that didn't feel like they were lined with barbed wire. But here, health isn't a baseline, it's a myth, a bedtime story, something that happens to other people, in other lives, with real beds and real food and the freedom to cough without wondering if it means you're dying. Because down here, your body is just a slowly breaking machine, rusted and overused and leaking from too many seams. And the worst part is that everyone around you looks the same. So no one notices when you start limping, when your fingers lose their grip, when your eyes can't focus on anything more than a foot away. Because what's the point? Nobody cares unless you stop working. And even then, it's not sympathy you get. It's consequences, punishment. Maybe a kick in the ribs to remind you that pain is a better motivator than compassion. And the sores. Oh God, the sores pop up like a grotesque garden blooming. Wherever the rags of your clothes rub too long, or the lead dust settles in the sweat-soaked creases. Some ooze, some bleed, some just hurt constantly, like they've burrowed into your nerves and set up camp, and there's no ointment, no bandage, no bath, just dirt and grit, and the vague hope that maybe the rats won't chew on you while you sleep. And sleep, if you can call it that, is more like unconsciousness with extra hallucinations, because half the time your dreams are just a rehash of the tunnel anyway, swinging your pickaxe in your head while your body finally gets to collapse. And then you wake up somehow more exhausted than before. And maybe that's because of the parasites. The invisible freeloaders you know are inside you, leeching your strength, feeding on your misery. And the skin-crawling feeling you get in the middle of the day isn't just metaphorical. It's real, actual things crawling on you, inside you, through you. And you don't even scream anymore when you find one. You just flick it off and keep going. Because nothing surprises you now. Not the smell of rot, not the taste of blood, not the sound of someone choking 2 tunnels away and nobody moving to help. Because what could you even do? You're barely holding it together as it is, and your hands shake more now. Not just from exhaustion, but from whatever it is this place is doing to you. Your nails have turned a weird pale color, and your fingertips are numb half the time. And that should scare you. But it doesn't, because fear requires energy, and you don't have any left. You've got sweat and dust and pain, and this grinding pressure in your skull that feels like something trying to escape. And maybe that's your sanity, packing its bags, checking out, slamming the door on its way out of your body. Like it can't believe you're still trying. And the joke is you are. You're still trying, still swinging, still waking up, still eating the soup that tastes like hot mud. Because somewhere deep down in whatever's left of you, there's a tiny flicker that says, maybe, just maybe, you'll survive long enough to see the sky again. Even though you know that's delusional. Even though you know the sky doesn't remember you. And even if it did, it wouldn't care. You used to think the body was resilient, that it could bounce back from anything, with enough rest or protein shakes, or maybe a weekend off. But that's because you lived in a world with showers and beds and doctors who didn't think rubbing crushed beetles on open wounds was cutting-edge medical practice here. Resilience is a lie. The body tells you right before it gives out, and you're starting to notice it in the little things, like how your left eye twitches now uncontrollably, at least a dozen times a day, or how your joints click when you move like they're not sure they want to keep participating in this charade. You call survival. Your back has developed a permanent bend from crouching in the tunnels, and your shoulders throb so constantly that pain isn't even a reaction anymore. It's just the default setting, like gravity or the stink of unwashed men in a stone coffin. And there's this strange pressure in your jaw now, like your teeth are shifting, like your skull is trying to escape itself. But you don't say anything, because what would you even say? Hey, I think my bones are melting is not a complaint that earns you sympathy. Just another eye roll, and maybe a sarcastic welcome to the club. And you've learned not to complain, not because you're stoic, but because everyone else is too tired to listen and too close to the edge to care. There's a man in the tunnel across from yours who used to hum while he worked some slow, sad tune. You couldn't place but kind of liked because it made the dark feel a little less dead. But today he's quiet, not dead yet, just quiet. And you realize that's somehow worse. Like something inside him broke that won't ever be fixed. And maybe that's how it starts, the rot from the inside. Not just your blood, or your lungs, or your spine, but your hope. The tiny ember you kept hidden under the useless belief that one day this might end, that someone might rescue you, that there was still a you to rescue. And now, even that's flickering out. You look down at your arms at the strange grey cast beneath the filth, the way your skin bruises from nothing, the way your nails are lifting from the beds, like they've decided they're done being part of this mess. And you think about how this place doesn't even kill you fast. It erodes you like water on stone, so slowly that you forget what whole ever felt like, and you keep working. Because the alternative is stopping, and stopping leads to punishment, and punishment leads to the pit, and nobody comes back from the pit. Not really, they crawl out sometimes, sure, dragging their broken limbs and their ruined eyes, and whatever pieces the rats left behind. But they're not people anymore, just shadows that still breathe. And the scary part is, you're starting to think that might be the endgame here. Not death, but transformation. Not into something worse, but into something less. Less aware, less human, less bothered by the taste of blood in your mouth, or the worms in your feet, or the way your fingers don't uncurl all the way anymore. And maybe that's mercy. Maybe becoming less is the only way to survive this. Not stronger or smarter or braver, just emptier. And as you feel another chunk of stone give way under your pickaxe, the dust puffing out like breath from a corpse, you wonder if you're already halfway there. If the part of you that used to scream at injustice or recoil at cruelty has already packed up and left, and all that's left is the shell, the tool, the thing that swings the pick and eats the bread and breathes the poison. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's the only version of you that can live down here, long enough to see the next bell, the next ration, the next fake sunrise. That means another day of not being dead yet. There's a rhythm to the madness now, a grim metronome that ticks inside your skull, guiding every swing of your pickaxe, every shuffle of your feet, every dry swallow that fails to wash the dust from your throat. You've stopped thinking of it as work, because work implies purpose and compensation, and maybe even dignity. And this is none of those things. This is ritual. This is sacrifice. This is you trading pieces of your body to the stone in exchange for one more breath, one more hour, one more illusion of life, and you're good at it now. Disturbingly good. Your hands know the weight of the pick. Before your brain finishes the command, your eyes track the cracks in the wall like they were drawn on your own skin. You can feel the fault lines in the rock through your soles, through your bones, through whatever part of you hasn't yet been hollowed out. And you work fast faster than most, not because you care, but because fast gets noticed. And sometimes getting noticed means they skip you when they're handing out beatings. Sometimes it means they give you an extra scoop of pottage that isn't even moldy yet. Sometimes it just means they leave you alone. And silence in this place is a luxury, on par with clean water and unbroken fingers. You've learned to stay ahead to anticipate the mood of the overseer by the way he breathes, to keep your head down when he's drunk and your pace up when he's bored. Because being useful is your armor now, your shield against irrelevance and the violence that follows it. And you've started to notice how the others look at you. Not quite admiration, not quite resentment. Something between fear and envy, like they can't decide if you're lucky or doomed. And maybe you can't either, because every rock you split is another confirmation that you're still alive, and every hour you endure is another inch closer to collapse. And it's funny, in the bleakest way possible, how you've become something they might call reliable, dependable, productive. As if those words mean anything when applied to a body soaked in lead and regret. And yet you cling to them. You let them wrap around you like a second skin. Because if you're not the strong one, the fast one, the one who keeps pace, then what are you? Just another body for the pile? And that thought keeps your arms moving even when they're numb. Keeps your feet planted even when they're blistered raw. Keeps your back bowed even when it screams for rest. Because rest is a luxury you can't afford, and one you've forgotten how to want. Your labor is currency, not for freedom, but for the illusion of choice, for a moment of stillness, before the whip cracks for a slightly softer patch of dirt to collapse on at the end of the day. And it's exhausting how much effort it takes just to survive the job itself. Not even the abuse or the starvation or the sickness, but the work, the actual mining, the endless dragging of carts and breaking of stone and hauling of weight heavier than any man should carry. And every step echoes through your legs like a warning bell. But you keep moving, keep loading, keep sweating. Because the alternative isn't rest. It's punishment. It's being dragged out by your hair and whipped until your bones show, or worse, until you don't feel it anymore. And they don't even have the decency to kill you. After that, they just toss you into the shallow shaft behind the storage pit and let you finish dying in your own time. And you've seen the way the body folds when it's given permission to stop pretending, and you've sworn quietly, desperately not to end up like that. Not yet. Not while you can still swing, still breathe, still hold on to the rhythm, even if it's only for one more hour. The cart is heavier than it should be, but you don't say anything, because complaining only proves how soft you still are. And you've worked too hard to scrape that softness off your skin, so you lean into the weight. Fingers wrapped around splintered handles slick with sweat and old blood boots, dragging through sludge thick enough to resist every step. And you haul it forward because that's the job now, not breaking rock or digging ore or anything. That sounds remotely like progress, just moving the product from one part of hell to another. A long tunnel lined with silent watchers too tired to speak and too smart to help. And the wheels catch on every crack, every pebble, every divine joke the Romans left in this godforsaken pit. And you feel it in your spine. A sharp throb that radiates down into your hips like your skeleton is protesting the abuse. But you don't stop. You can't stop because there's a line forming behind you, and the overseer's shadow just entered the corridor. And even though he's not yelling yet, you know it's coming. The whip crack, or the boot, or just the look that says, he's one bad mood away from making an example out of someone. And today, it might be you, so you dig deeper, grit your teeth and keep pushing. Because if you let go of this cart, this task, this illusion of function, there's nothing left to hold on to. And isn't that the worst part? How the labor becomes your identity, your anchor, your excuse not to think too hard about what came before or what might come after. Your memories are no good down here anyway. Too clean, too bright, too soft around the edges. And thinking about them just makes this place hurt. More so. You erase them piece by piece like everything else and replace them with tasks. Load, push, unload, repeat until you're nothing but a series of motions connected by exhaustion. The other slaves pass you as they head deeper into the tunnels, their faces blank coated in grime, eyes glassy from too little sleep and too much poison. And you wonder if you look like that now, if your humanity has faded into that same grey smudge. And the answer is probably yes, because no one here is human anymore. Not really, just variations of worn-down flesh, trying not to be the next to fall. And you reach the drop-off zone. At last, a half-collapsed chamber, where the ore is piled high and forgotten, until the next crew drags it to the smelting shed above ground. Not that you've seen the sun in weeks, maybe months. You dump the cart and take a moment to breathe. Not because it helps the air down here still tastes like metal and misery, but because your hands won't stop shaking unless you pause. And even then, they don't stop. Not really. And you lean against the wall, rough stones scraping against your back. And you know you can't stay long. There's more to haul, more to carry, more to lose. But for this single moment, you let the numbness wash over you. Let yourself exist without swinging or walking, or pretending you're anything other than a mule in human skin. And it's almost peaceful in a way. The quiet between tortures, the breath before the next blow. And then you hear the whistle again, sharp and high signaling. Another load, and your body lurches forward before your brain catches up. Already turning, already walking, already accepting that rest is not something you earn here. It's something you steal in seconds. And if you want more than that, you better pray the mountain collapses and saves you from having to finish the day. You're halfway through your second haul when the cart's front wheel decides it's had enough, snaps off with a crack like a femur breaking under pressure, and the whole load of raw lead ore dumps forward into a slurry of mud and rock and broken dreams. You freeze for a second, just long enough to feel that familiar cold spike of dread shoot through your chest. Because now, you're not just exhausted. Now you're behind, and being behind down here is a crime. With its own sentence, you kneel and start scooping chunks of ore back into the broken cart with your hands, because there's nothing else to do, and no one is going to help you. Not even the men walking past who slow just enough to watch, maybe out of pity, maybe out of relief, that it's not them, and you don't blame them because you wouldn't help you either. Not when the overseer is already pacing at the tunnel entrance, like a dog that hasn't been fed in 3 days. You shovel with your bare hands until your fingers bleed, and the ore slices new lines into your palms, and the cart still won't roll because the axle's bent now, and the wheel's gone completely, just disappeared into the sludge. Like it knew this wasn't worth the fight, and you're left holding a ruined load and a ruined cart, and your heart is pounding. Like it's trying to outrun the consequences, and then he's there. The overseer close enough to smell the wine on his breath and see the cracked leather of the whip in his hand. And he doesn't speak at first, just looks at you, then at the cart, then back at you, like you've personally betrayed the Roman Empire by daring to let gravity do its job. And he raises the whip, and you know it's coming. You brace flinch, but it still lands with a sound that doesn't even seem real, like flesh being torn from wood. And the pain blooms instantly, hot and electric, and your body tries to crawl away from itself, but there's nowhere to go. You're already on the ground, already failing, and the second strike comes without warning. This one lower wrapping around your hip like it's trying to drag you back to reality, and you hear yourself make a sound, not a scream exactly, more like something dying and trying to apologize for the inconvenience. And he mutters something about laziness and weakness and God's help you. If you ever breathe wrong again, and then he's gone, just like that, bored with the show, and you lie there in the mud and awe, and your own sweat trying to remember which direction was forward, your body buzzing like a hornet's nest, and your thoughts skipping like broken wheels, and eventually you sit up because you have to, because staying down just means more attention, and attention means more pain, and you drag the busted cart to the side, gather what ore you can carry in your arms and begin the slow walk back, stumbling every few feet, dripping blood and defeat in equal measure. And nobody looks at you now, not because they don't care, but because they do too much. And seeing you reminds them that this is what happens when the mind decides to notice you. This is what it looks like when you fall behind and you reach the drop zone again. Unload your sad little pile and start back for another, even though your legs are shaking and your back is raw and your mind is unraveling thread by thread, because the mind doesn't care about any of that. The mind only knows numbers, weight movement, and the sound of footsteps that haven't stopped yet. And as long as yours are still echoing, you're still useful. And being useful is the only thing that might keep you alive just a little bit longer. You used to think society was built on rules and laws and systems designed to keep things running smoothly, maybe even fairly, but down here under the surface in the cracked belly of empire. There's no illusion of justice, just a brutal hierarchy carved into stone and stitched into every interaction, and you're at the very bottom. Not a rung on the ladder so much as the dirt. It's planted in the one everyone steps on, bleeds on, dies on. And the worst part is how natural it starts to feel. How quickly your brain stops screaming about injustice and starts memorizing protocols, who to bow your head around when to stay invisible, which overseers are mean drunk versus mean sober, because that's the currency here, not dignity or effort or morality, but fear, obedience, and the ability to disappear into the background. When violence comes sniffing, and violence always comes sniffing, like a mangy dog on a short leash, snapping at ankles just to see who'll flinch, and you flinched. Oh, you flinched enough to know what happens when you don't, and so you fall in line. Not because you're weak, but because you've learned the truth. Strength down here isn't defiance, it's endurance. It's knowing how to take a beating and still show up for roll call with your eyes open and your mouth shut. And speaking of roll call, that's what you're doing now. Lining up shoulder to shoulder with the other half-dead, dirt-crusted, hollow-eyed ghosts that pass for workers in this mine, waiting for the overseer to count you like livestock. No names, just nods and gestures, and the occasional reminder of what happens when you try to escape the order of things and the reminder. Today is a body not fresh, not really even whole, strung up near the entrance with a message carved into the chest that translates loosely to property, doesn't run, and it's not even the worst thing you've seen this week. You glance away like everyone else. Eyes flat, expression blank, because reacting to it is dangerous. Human emotion is dangerous. It makes you look soft and soft. Things don't last. You know who does last. The snitches, the favorites, the ones who bend but never break, the ones who report their own bunkmates to earn a few extra crumbs or a shift above ground. Moving crates instead of inhaling poison for 16 hours. And maybe you hate them. Maybe you used to hate them, but now you understand them. Now you nod when they pass and keep your hatred folded up somewhere small and quiet inside you. Because this system doesn't reward righteousness, it rewards survival. And if that means watching a friend get dragged away for stealing a second bowl of pottage and saying nothing, you say nothing. Because next time, it could be you. And what's friendship worth when your ribs are showing and your skin is peeling? And the world has made it very clear that kindness is a luxury reserved for people who don't wake up in pits you used to wonder why no one revolts, why the masses don't rise up and tear down the walls. But now you get it. Now you feel it in your bones because exhaustion is the leash, fear is the collar, and hunger is the hand that tightens it every time you think about fighting back. And so you take your number nod when you're told move, when you're herded. Because being compliant isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's the art of pretending you're broken just enough to be safe. And as you shuffle back into the tunnel with the others, you wonder how many more days you can keep this up. How many more acts you've got in you before the mask slips and the system sees that spark you've been hiding and crushes it, like it crushes everything else. It starts with the little things, the nods, the glances, the way certain people get called by name, while the rest of you are just grunts and numbers and meat in motion. The way one guy always seems to get a second ladle of pottage without ever asking, or how another one never ends up on latrine duty, even though that's supposed to be random, and you learn fast that there's a pecking order, even among the condemned, that even in a pit built on suffering and silence, someone always figures out how to crawl slightly higher on the pile of corpses and call it progress. The favorites aren't special because they're better. They're special because they're useful, because they snitch or flatter or offer their loyalty in exchange for scraps. And maybe that disgusted you once, but now you understand it's a transaction just like everything else. And it's easy to hate the snitch until you're the one with cracked ribs and they're the one not bleeding. It's easy to judge from the bottom, but you're not even sure where the bottom is anymore. You just know you haven't reached it yet because there's always someone lower, someone being dragged across the floor by the ankles for stealing water or collapsing mid-shift, someone sobbing into their own hands because they made eye contact with the wrong man and got half their face rearranged for the offense, and nobody helps them, nobody reaches out. Not because they're heartless, but because they've been trained by fear shaped by consequence. Everyone here knows that mercy is dangerous. It gets noticed, it gets punished, it makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is like blood in the water. You can't let them see it, or you'll be next. So you keep your eyes forward, your shoulders low, and you learn to shrink without moving to exist, without presence to vanish into the group, while still performing just enough to be forgettable. And that's the real trick. Being just useful enough not to be punished, and just invisible enough not to be exploited. The balance is razor thin and constantly shifting depending on the mood of the overseer or the whim of some half-drunk administrator who hasn't lifted a pickaxe in his life, but thinks he understands the workload. because he glanced at a scroll once. And you live in that space, that crack between contempt and necessity, that narrow ledge, where if you play it right, you might get through the day with your skin intact. But if you lean too far in either direction, you fall. And when you fall, nobody catches you. They just step over you, keep swinging, keep marching, because they can't afford to stop the machine. Doesn't pause for broken parts, it just replaces them. And today, it almost replaced a kid too small for this job, too slow to keep up, caught lagging behind the group during the midday transfer, and the overseer grabbed him by the hair and screamed something about dead weight. And for a moment, you thought he was going to snap the boy's neck right there. But instead, he threw him to the ground and ordered 2 others to drag him back, and you didn't move, nobody did. And afterward, the boy sat in the corner holding his arm like something was torn inside it. Rocking slowly, eyes glazed, and you couldn't even bring yourself to pity him because part of you was just relieved it wasn't you. And that's what this place does. It turns your empathy into calculation, your guilt into strategy, and your humanity into something you can only afford in tiny doses when no one's watching. And even then, you have to ask yourself if it's worth the risk. You get used to being watched, not in the way that makes you feel seen, but in the way that makes your skin crawl, that makes you flinch at footsteps and keep your shoulders hunched, like maybe if you take up less space, they'll forget you exist. But they never do. The overseers, the guards, the informants, they're always watching, not because they care what you're doing, but because they need someone to punish someone, to use someone to remind the rest of you that you're not people anymore. And power down here isn't about rules, it's about proximity. Who's closest to the whip, who holds it, who wants it next. And the hierarchy isn't a pyramid, it's a pit. And the only way to climb is to step on someone else's back while they're still breathing. You've seen it happen, seen men sell out their cellmates for a sliver of bread, or a shift on the surface, or the simple promise that they won't be next. And at first, it sickened you, but now you understand it. Now, you recognize the desperation behind the eyes of the man who smiles too much at the overseers and talks too little to everyone else. And you keep your distance, not because you're better, but because you don't have the stomach for betrayal, and you're not sure who you'd even protect anymore. The people here aren't friends, not really, just fellow survivors orbiting the same misery. And even that thin connection starts to fray when the fear gets thick enough. You hear whispers sometimes about new laws, new punishments. A crackdown on laziness, like anyone here has time to be lazy. But the Romans love their theatre, and sometimes you're the audience. Sometimes you're the stage, and sometimes you're the prop, bleeding and silent and expected to stay that way. And today, the performance is starting early. The guards drag a man into the open square between the shafts. His arms bound his face, a mess of bruises, and the charge is written on a scrap of parchment. Nobody bothers to read, doesn't matter. Could be stealing, could be slowing down, could be looking the wrong way. What matters is that the sentence is public and loud and bloody, a warning dressed as justice, and they make a spectacle of it, stripping him, tying him to a post. The crowd forced to stand and watch, no sound but the crack of the whip and the wet slap of flesh tearing until his back looks like shredded parchment. And you can't tell where the bruises end and the open wounds begin, and nobody moves. Nobody speaks, because if you look away, you're next. And if you flinch too hard, you're weak. And if you care too much, you're a threat. And threats get dealt with before they become problems. So you watch, you internalize. You file it under what not to do, and when it's over they leave him there slumped and barely breathing, and the silence that follows is heavier than the heat, heavier than the awe, heavier than anything you've carried today, because it's not just him they broke, it's everyone who saw it, everyone who had to pretend they didn't want to scream or run or fall to their knees. And as you're herded back into the tunnels, back to the labor, back to the routine that grinds you down, until you forget the shape of resistance, you realize that this isn't survival, it's obedience. And that obedience is the only thing left holding you together. Because if you stop following the rules, even the ones they make up on the spot, the ones that shift like sand under your feet, then you're not just dead, you're spectacle. And there's no coming back from that. You've never been particularly religious, not really. Maybe you said a few prayers growing up. Maybe you whispered a plea or two when things got tight or scary or out of your control. But nothing consistent, nothing that stuck. And now here in this pit of stone and smoke and screaming, where the sun is just a rumor and death feels more personal than God. Ever did you find yourself thinking about divinity in strange ways, not out of faith but out of survival? Because belief, real or faked, buys you a little protection, a little buffer, like padding around your sanity, like a thin layer of something between you and the full, unfiltered brutality of your life. The Romans have their gods, all stiff marble faces and stern Latin names, thunderbolts and vengeance and empire-sized egos, but they don't feel close. They're for the soldiers and senators and generals who think conquest is a virtue, not for slaves scraping blood out of their palms while coughing up metal. And yet even those gods have found their way down here, carved into damp stone in the corners of the tunnels, their symbols scratched into walls by broken fingernails left behind like breadcrumbs. For the desperate, and sometimes before a shift, you'll see someone kneel, bow their head toward a rough etching of Mercury or Mars or Pluto, muttering something in a voice too low to be anything but terrified. And you wonder if it helps, if praying to a god of war keeps the lash from your back, or if Pluto, lord of the underworld, feels more like a landlord now than a myth. The way his name gets whispered, like a curse, like a warning. Like maybe he's watching this place and taking notes. But then there are the others too, the imported gods, the ones dragged in by prisoners from every corner of the empire, their beliefs stitched together like the patchwork rags everyone wears. And they pray too to Baal or Mithras or Isis or someone you've never heard of. And they offer little gifts, pebbles, teeth, moldy, crusts of bread arranged carefully beside candles, made from fat and hope. And even if you don't believe, you feel something in those moments, something heavy and ancient and impossible to name, like the walls are listening, like something down here is awake. And maybe that's the part that unsettles you most. Not that the gods are gone, but that they're here, actually here, watching, feeding off the devotion of the broken, because who else would a god listen to? But the desperate and desperation is everywhere now, clinging to people like dust, choking the air more than the poison does. And sometimes you catch yourself staring too long at a carving, tracing the lines with your eyes, not because you think it'll save you, but because you need something to fill the silence in your mind, something to keep you from unraveling completely, and eventually even you start playing along. Just a nod before the shift, just a whispered thought before you fall asleep. If you can call what you do at night sleeping, and maybe it's nothing, maybe it's placebo for the soul, but when your body is wrecked and your mind is fraying, a placebo's still better than the truth. Because the truth is that nobody's coming to save you. Not the gods, not the overseers, not even death, not quickly anyway. And the only thing you've got is whatever scrap of belief. You can smuggle past the hopelessness without it falling apart in your hands. Sometimes you wonder if you've done something wrong, not wrong, like stealing or slipping up on the quota, but wrong in the cosmic sense, like you offended something ancient and hungry without meaning to. Like this whole life, this sentence of dirt and sweat and silence, is some kind of divine punishment you forgot to earn. And that idea sticks in your head longer than it should, worms its way into your thoughts while you're swinging the pickaxe or dragging the cart or staring at the wall too long during your so-called rest period. Because down here it's easy to believe you're cursed that you were marked by the gods before you ever took your first breath, and they've been laughing ever since. And when things go wrong, and they always do, you stop blaming the system or the overseer or even your own bad luck. And you start blaming yourself, not because it makes sense, but because it gives the pain a shape, gives the suffering a reason. And if there's a reason, maybe there's an end. Maybe there's redemption. Maybe you're just working off a debt you don't remember incurring. And one day, if you bleed enough or starve enough, or beg the right way, you'll be clean. And when that thought takes hold, it changes how you move, how you breathe, how you see the others around you, because suddenly every flinch feels earned, every blow deserved, and you start to see rituals everywhere. Not the official Roman ones with incense and togas and sacrificial goats, but the desperate, private, dirty ones built from fear and superstition, like the guy who always touches the tunnel wall 3 times before entering his shaft, or the woman who mutters the same phrase before eating, or the man who rubs ash into his forehead every morning, like he's trying to disappear into the mine itself, and nobody questions it, because nobody wants to be the one who tempts fate. And even if it's nonsense, even if it's delusion, what else do you have? What's the alternative logic? Science, reason. Those things don't survive down here. They're too clean, too confident. They belong to people who have choices. And choice is a memory now, a story you used to believe in. And the only thing that feels real is the possibility that something divine is watching and waiting and weighing every move you make. And maybe, just maybe, if you suffer well enough, long enough, quietly enough, you'll be spared the worst of what comes after. Not because you earned it, but because you finally broke right. And that thought comforts you in a way it shouldn't, because it's not hope, not really. It's surrender wrapped in sacred language. It's compliance disguised as enlightenment. And you know, it's dangerous to think that way. No, it means you've slipped another inch down the slope toward becoming one of the ones who don't speak, don't look up, don't care if their hand is bleeding or their breath is shallow, or their fingers go numb for hours at a time. Because if the gods want you broken, what's the point of resisting? And that's what scares you most. Not the idea that the gods might be punishing you, but the idea that maybe they're not. Maybe this is just life, meaningless and cruel and completely unattended, and everything else is just decoration. Prayers are just noise rituals, just habits and faith, just another lie you tell yourself to stay standing. There's a shrine near the back of one of the older shafts tucked into a crevice so narrow you have to turn sideways just to squeeze in. And no one talks about it, not openly, not where the overseers might hear, but everyone knows it's there, knows it's different from the usual scratchings and muttered superstitions that hang in the tunnels like mildew, because this one's bigger, older, layered with years of desperate belief, and the air around it feels colder somehow, quieter, like even the meaning stops to listen, and you find yourself there tonight. Not by choice exactly, but because your feet carried you when your mind wandered, and now you're kneeling in the dark, staring at a mess of half-melted candles. Broken bones arranged in patterns too intentional to be random, and a dozen crude symbols carved into the rock with such force the stone still seems to tremble around the edges. It's not Roman, not Greek, not anything you recognize, but you feel it in your gut like an echo. Something ancient and wrong, and maybe real in the way that only pain makes things real. And you don't know what to say, what to offer. So you just sit there, breathing shallow bones, aching skin, crawling from sweat, and invisible parasites. And you wait, not for a sign exactly, but for some shift in the silence. Some acknowledgement from the universe that you've been seen, that your suffering has been logged somewhere, filed under pending. And for a second, you almost believe it. You almost convince yourself that this crumbling altar of rot and soot and sadness is listening, that it might be more merciful than the gods above ground with their temples and their statues and their priests, who've never had to watch someone die with a pickaxe still clutched in their hands. But the silence holds thick and total, and you realize that's the real power of a place like this. It doesn't need to answer, doesn't need to reward it. just needs you to believe that maybe someday it will. Because belief is fuel, belief is control. And if you stop believing, even in the barest, most cracked version of a God, you start noticing how bad it really is, how lost you really are. And that kind of clarity can kill you faster than any disease. So you whisper something. You're not even sure what a plea or a confession, or just the sound of a human voice in a place that eats them. And then you crawl back out slowly, carefully, trying not to knock over any of the offerings, because some part of you still fears consequences, not divine wrath exactly, but the kind that comes from hoping out loud in front of people who gave up hoping years ago. And as you return to the sleeping pit, that hole in the ground where warmth is shared and dignity is a memory, you pass others who are just starting their own whispered rituals, fingers tapping stone in threes, heads bowed in silence, eyes darting toward shadows that have seen too much. And you realize that faith down here isn't about salvation. It's about rhythm, about repetition, about surviving the unbearable, by pretending it's not pointless. And maybe that's all belief has ever been. Maybe above ground, it's dressed up in incense and hymns and golden robes. But down here, it's raw and ugly and necessary. It's a lie. You keep telling yourself, not because it's beautiful, but because it's the only thing that hasn't abandoned you yet. There's a moment every day when the mind goes completely still. Not silent, not empty, just still in that thick, suffocating way that makes the air feel heavier and the darkness feel more solid, like the walls are holding their breath and waiting for something to happen. And in that moment, you feel it again, that hum beneath your feet. The tremor you tell yourself is just fatigue, just your heartbeat echoing through your bones. But you know better, you all do. Because this place isn't just killing you with labor and lead and the absence of sun. It's killing you with its weight, with the way the earth presses in from all sides, like it's trying to remember what it was like before you cut into it. And some days you swear the tunnels have changed, that the path you take to your station is longer or sharper or colder. But when you try to mention it, no one wants to hear it. They look away, mumble, pick up their tools faster, because you don't talk about the mine like it's alive. Even though everyone treats it like it is, everyone avoids the cracks in the wall that weren't there yesterday. Everyone steps over the same stretch of stone where the light from the torch always dies, for no reason. Everyone knows that when the wind starts howling deep in the shafts, wind that shouldn't exist this far underground, you don't ask where it's coming from. You just work faster and pray quieter and don't look back. And lately, that wind's been louder, sharper. It carries dust and whispers and that smell. The one that isn't just rot or sweat or fire, but something sour and ancient, like the breath of something buried, something that doesn't appreciate being disturbed. And you tell yourself it's nothing, just your mind playing tricks on you again, just fatigue, hallucinations. But then someone goes missing. Someone who was just there swinging beside you an hour ago, and no one talks about it. No one forms a search party or alerts the guards, or even asks his name. They just close ranks and keep moving because the mind takes what it wants, and questioning it is a good way to be next. And you start to notice the patterns, the places where tools get dropped and never found, the corners where people work slower and talk less, the shifts where more people are quiet and the torches seem dimmer. And you learn to mimic them, to follow the rules no one teaches you. But everyone obeys. Don't whistle, don't run, don't ever be the last one out of the shaft. And maybe it's paranoia. Maybe it's just the collective hallucination of 100 starving, poisoned bodies crammed into the same living grave. But you've seen enough to know that fear isn't irrational when it keeps you alive. And so you keep your mouth shut and your eyes down and your fingers crossed, even though you don't believe in luck anymore. Not really. Because luck would have meant being born somewhere else, anywhere else. And down here, All you've got is instinct and superstition, and the creeping certainty that you are not alone in these tunnels, that something old and angry is watching you from the cracks. Not a god, not a man, but something in between, something with no name, and too many eyes. And when the earth shifts, and the dust rains down, and the lights gutter, and everyone freezes at once, you feel it again, that stillness, that breathless pause before the mind decides who it wants to keep. It's not just the mind itself that's trying to kill you, though. That would be enough. It's the air too, or what passes for air down here, thick and stale and sour, like you're breathing through an old rag soaked in vinegar and ash. Every inhale scratches your throat like dry sand, and every exhale feels like it's taking more than it gives back. And some days it feels like you're drowning without water, lungs folding in on themselves as the dust clings to every wet surface inside your chest. And that's when the coughing starts soft at first, just a tickle, but then deeper, harder, coming from so many throats at once. It sounds like a chorus of the damned hacking and wheezing in the dark, while the overseers scream for silence, as if that ever worked. And there's no clean air, no ventilation, no pause in the shift to rest your body or clear your head, because the only air that moves is the kind that sneaks in from cracks or the surface vents. And sometimes that air brings cold biting, cold, not refreshing, not welcome, just sudden and wrong, like the breath of something ancient stirring in its sleep. And the temperature swings make you sweat and shiver. In the same breath, your skin clammy and raw, your body confused and miserable. And then there's the flooding, because yes, somehow it gets worse when the water table shifts, or it rains too much up top, and the runoff snakes its way down into the tunnels, like a predator, silent and fast and brown with filth. And when it comes, there's no warning, just a distant sound like a whisper, growing louder until your ankles are wet, and then your knees, and then you're running without thinking. Because water down here isn't just water, it's death. Wearing a muddy coat, and more than once you've seen a tunnel disappear overnight, swallowed by the mine itself and the ones inside. Well, no one ever talks about them again, not because they're forgotten, but because remembering them means admitting the ground is not your ally, and you can't afford to turn the earth into your enemy when it's already your grave, so you pretend it's stable. Pretend the tremors are minor, pretend the ceiling isn't bowing slightly, where that last rockfall happened, and the weather, even though you're 100 feet underground, still finds a way to reach you, not directly, but through shifts in pressure and moisture and smell, and you start to feel it in your bones before it comes, like your body is tuning into some ancient frequency, a storm sense carved by evolution or trauma, or both. And when that pressure hits, you know something's coming, a cave-in maybe, or another gas leak, or a shaft collapsing, because someone got careless, or the mind just decided to breathe again, and you hold your breath. Like that might help, like your lungs haven't already betrayed you. And when it passes, you exhale slow, careful, like the walls are listening, and then it's back to work. Because no one gets time off for almost dying, not when there's ore to move and quotas to hit, and men to break, and as you haul another cart through ankle-deep mud, with your hands blistering and your nose bleeding. For no clear reason, you think maybe this is what nature's revenge looks like. Not lightning or fire or floods, but this slow decay, quiet collapse your body corroding in a place it was never meant to be, and the world not even bothering to notice. The ground shifts again, subtle at first, just a tremble under your heels, like a muscle twitch in the bones of the earth, and you freeze. Everyone does, even the ones who haven't spoken a full sentence in days, because there's something universal about that kind of silence. The way it grips a group like a hand around the throat. And you wait, breath held, heart pounding loud enough in your chest to make you nauseous. And when nothing else happens, not yet, you slowly go back to work. but everything's off now. Every footstep feels too loud, every crack in the wall too wide, every drop of condensation from the ceiling too deliberate. And you start noticing the mine in a way you try not to. The sweat on the stone that isn't from you, the breeze that shouldn't exist, the way shadows fall in places they shouldn't and don't move when they should. And no one talks about it, but you all feel it the way the mind grows more restless with each passing day. And not just structurally, not just physically, but something else, something harder to name, like the walls are getting impatient, like they're waiting for a collapse you can't predict or escape. And that's when the animals come, or rather the absence of them, because the rats and bugs and crawling things that usually share this space with you, the ones you curse and swat and step on in your sleep, they're gone. And that's worse, because when even the vermin evacuate, you know something's wrong, you know something's coming, and the silence left in their place is louder than anything you've heard in weeks. And you keep your head down, hands moving back, straining, because stillness makes you a target. Not just for the overseers, but for the mine itself. And there's a belief down here, not always spoken, but always understood, that if the mine wants you, it gets you. And no amount of effort or prayer or pleading stops. That it doesn't matter how hard you work, or how quiet you keep, or how deep you bow when it's your time. It's your time. And maybe it'll be a collapse or a sinkhole, or a poison gas pocket, or just your own heart deciding it's done. But one way or another, the mind collects its due, and you've seen too many faces vanish for that to be just fear. Too many spots left empty on the floor, and too many shifts start with one less man than the day before. And no one ever has answers, just shrugs and silence, and the same rhythm continuing. Like the earth didn't just eat somebody alive, and maybe you're one of the lucky ones. Maybe the mine hasn't noticed you yet, or maybe it has, and is just biding its time, letting you rot a little longer, so it can enjoy the collapse when it finally comes. And that thought sticks with you, crawls down your spine as you carry another load through the narrow passage, with a ceiling so low you can feel the rock brushing your back with every step. And then the wind comes again, colder this time, sharper, and it brings a smell like rust and mold and old blood, and it carries a sound too faint, like weeping, maybe laughter, maybe both. And you don't look behind you, you don't stop. You just move faster, because the last time someone turned around in that corridor, they didn't come back, and their screams kept echoing long after the wind died down. So you keep your eyes forward, your mouth shut, and your prayers internal, even though you're not sure who's left to hear them. And when you finally make it to the drop point and dump the load, your hands shaking, your breath too shallow, you realize that the worst part isn't that the mine might kill you. It's that it won't have to try very hard, because everything inside you is already collapsing on its own. You don't notice the hunger anymore, not in the way you used to. Not like an alarm or a sharp pain or even a growl. It's just a constant now, a dull emptiness stitched into your core, as familiar and quiet as your own breath. And maybe that's worse. Maybe the body giving up on asking is the scariest part, because it means you've crossed some line where need becomes a background noise and survival just turns into routine, and what passes for food down here doesn't help, if you can call it food at all, because what they hand you twice a day is barely a concept. A scoop of greyish barley paste, watery and lukewarm, slopped into a chipped bowl that still smells like the last person who used it. And if you're lucky, it doesn't have any rocks in it. But that's a big if, and you've cracked a tooth before. Still have the shard in your pocket like a souvenir from a vacation you never got to take, and no one complains, because complaining wastes energy and draws eyes. And what's the point? Anyway, nobody's listening. The guards don't eat what you eat. They get real bread and cheese and dried figs and maybe even wine. If they're posted high enough, you've seen the scraps in their trash once. when you were assigned latrine detail and had to pass near the surface compound, and the smell of that food. Actual food, warm food, seasoned food, hit you so hard you almost cried. Not because you expected to eat any, but because you remembered what it was like to want something that specific to crave. Not just calories, but flavor, comfort, memory. And that kind of craving feels dangerous now too. Personal, too human. So you bury it, smother it under bland gruel and apathy, and whatever version of gratitude you can fake to keep your stomach from turning against you. And water, well, water is a different story because clean water is basically a myth, a bedtime story. Older slaves tell to amuse themselves. What you get instead is a thick, warmish trickle from a clay jug that smells faintly of metal and always has things floating in it. Things you learn not to look at too closely, because your thirst will override your disgust anyway. And you tell yourself it's fine, it's just minerals or dust, or maybe some kind of ancient Roman seasoning they forgot to take out, and you sip slow because drinking too fast makes your belly cramp. And puking means wasting something you can't afford to lose. And once, months ago, maybe you found a pebble-sized lump of mold in your ration and picked it out and set it aside and thought for a second about eating it anyway, because at least it had a texture that wasn't paste. And that's when you realized you weren't scared of dying from the food anymore. You were scared of not having any at all, because the threat here isn't poison or sickness. It's absence, the slow fade into starvation that doesn't come with drama or warning. Just smaller steps, longer silences, knees that don't want to bend, fingers that don't want to close. And then one day, your bowl's still half full and you can't finish it because your body's already decided it's done. Pretending. And you've seen that happen to others, seen them shrink and stumble and vanish. One skipped meal at a time. No screaming, no ceremony, just gone. And you think maybe the worst thing the mind feeds you isn't the food at all. It's the idea that this is enough. You start noticing the way people eat down here. Not just what they eat, because that part never changes, but how the little rituals, the desperation tucked into every gesture, how some of them hunch over their bowls like animals guarding a kill, shoulders curled, eyes flicking side to side in case someone gets too close. Even though nobody really wants to steal because everyone's equally starving and equally afraid, and some eat slow, savoring every gritty bite, like it's the last meal they'll ever get, which it probably is, if they're in bad enough shape to eat that slow. And others just gulp it down like a chore. No chewing, no thinking, like they're trying to outpace their own nausea or force the pace past their gag reflex before their stomach changes its mind, and you're somewhere in between, careful but not frantic chewing. Even though it doesn't help, the texture doesn't unlock any hidden flavor, just prolongs the act of feeding your body something it doesn't want but absolutely needs. And then there's the water, if you can call it that, served in whatever vessel happens to be clean enough to not kill you on the spot. Sometimes a shared cup, sometimes a hollowed out rock, sometimes your own hands. If you're lucky enough to be near a drip line when no one else is watching. And it always tastes like pennies and rot, like it's passed through 10 layers of disease before it hit your tongue, and it leaves a film in your mouth that never quite goes away, no matter how long you spit or scrape your teeth with a fingernail. But you drink it anyway, because thirst is worse than fear. Thirst is betrayal from within, and you've seen what happens to people who try to go without. They start seeing things blinking too hard, trembling like kicked dogs, and eventually they just don't get up anymore. And it's hard to tell if it was dehydration, or starvation, or just being too tired to bother. And the overseers don't ask questions. They just take the body, toss it in the cart with the others, and someone else gets assigned their quota before the soup even cools. And what's strange is how fast it all becomes normal. How the idea of drinking water with bugs in it doesn't even make you flinch now. How the texture of mold doesn't make you gag. How you start to crave the bite of salt in your sweat because at least it reminds you. You're still alive, still leaking minerals, still processing something. And that's the real horror, not the food or the water or the hunger, but the way your body adapts, lowers its standards, rewrites what's acceptable. Teaches itself to digest misery without complaint, and you think about what you used to eat years ago before this. The crisp crunch of bread crust, the sweetness of fruit, the warmth of broth that didn't sting your throat like acid, and the memory doesn't even feel real anymore. It feels fictional, like something you read in a story, someone made up to torture you. Because nothing in this place supports the idea of pleasure, and food has stopped being nourishment and become negotiation. You eat so you can stand. You stand so you can swing, you swing, so they don't beat you. And then you do it all again twice a day, every day, until you stop needing food, because your body's decided to give up the game altogether. And on those days the gruel still arrives, still gets shoved into your hands, and you stare at it for a long time, wondering whether the effort of chewing is worth what little it gives you back. You can always tell who's new by how they react to the food, the way their faces twist up like they've been tricked, like they genuinely expected something warm or filling or even slightly edible. They try to hide it, they really do, but the revulsion is instinctive. The way their noses wrinkle and their eyes squint and their hands hesitate, hovering just long enough over the bowl to say, they're not ready for this yet, and you want to tell them they never will be that. No one gets used to it, not really. They just learn to swallow faster, to think less, to scrape the edge of the bowl with their fingers and suck the gruel out from under their nails, because letting any of it go to waste feels like a sin. Now, not against the gods or the empire or even the system, but against yourself. Against the version of you that still believes your body deserves something better. And sometimes, when you're too tired to eat, or the nausea wins, or your mouth is too dry to chew, you stare at the paste and think about the ingredients. Not because you care, but because you're trying to distract yourself, trying to find some clue in the texture, or the flavor that might explain what it used to be. Barley maybe, or lentils. But there's always something off, something gritty and metallic and faintly sour, like it's been sitting in a cracked amphora under the sun for a few weeks, too long. And the rumor, because of course there's always a rumor, is that they stretch the rations with ground up bone, with the sweepings from the storage floor, with whatever they can't use elsewhere. And you've seen too many little white flecks in your spoon to fully dismiss it. So you don't think about it, not deeply. You just swallow and move on and pretend your stomach doesn't hate you for it. And as for the water, well, you've learned to manage expectations there too, because it's never cold, never clean, never quite enough. It comes when it comes, usually carried in a filthy jug by someone who doesn't care, and ladled out with something that looks like it used to be a ladle, but now resembles a broken scoop, tied together with rope and optimism. And if you're too slow or too far in the back, you don't get any simple as that. No arguments, no appeals, just the sound of the jug going dry and the look of panic on a dozen faces who now have to survive another shift with nothing but grit in their mouths and hope in their eyes. And then there's the smell. Always the smell clinging to the water, rising from the food, seeping from the walls. It's part mildew, part rot, part human. And no matter how long you're down here, no matter how much lead you breathe, or how many times you scrub your skin with handfuls of gravel, it stays, gets into your clothes, into your hair, into your teeth. And sometimes in those rare moments when the overseers aren't yelling, and the pickaxes aren't clanging, and the air goes still, you swear you can taste it. The smell, like the mine itself, is feeding you now. Not the rations, not the guards, but the place. And what it's feeding you isn't sustenance, it's surrender, one mouthful at a time. There's a sound the whip makes right before it lands, a sharp inhale of air, a hiss through dry leather and tension. And you don't forget it, not ever. It lives in your spine and in the back of your teeth. It echoes behind your thoughts, even when no one's being punished, and sometimes you hear it in your sleep and wake up gasping like it hit you anyway. Because down here, punishment isn't a possibility. It's a routine, a part of the day, like the shift bell or the slop bowls or the rock dust in your throat. And it's not always for something. Not really. Not like how you used to think justice worked with reasons and explanations, and a chance to explain here. It's about the mood of the guard, the noise you made when you coughed, the pace you kept when your foot was bleeding, the face you made when your pottage had maggots in it, and whether or not someone in charge decided that face looked like disrespect, because disrespect is the word they use when they want to hurt someone and need to justify it later. And the truth is, nobody knows how many rules there actually are, because they change constantly, shift like smoke, like a trap. You can't see until you've already stepped in it, and everyone's broken them at some point. Because surviving means moving, breathing, thinking, and all of those things can be mistakes depending on who's watching. And that's why fear lives here, not just in the heart or the hands, but in the eyes, in the way people avoid looking at one another for too long, in the way they flinch when a voice gets raised or a boot scrapes the stone too suddenly, and you learn to recognize the signs, the tension in the air right before it happens, like the tunnel itself is bracing the way silence falls too quickly, the way people start backing up without looking like they're backing up. And then the blow lands and the body bends, and there's blood or not screaming or not, but always the same outcome. Someone smaller, someone quieter, someone who learned a lesson they already knew, and you tell yourself, it's not you this time, not today, because you kept your eyes down and your pace steady and your mouth shut. And maybe you did, but maybe that won't matter. Maybe today's your day, anyway, because randomness is part of the game. Keeps everyone guessing, keeps everyone afraid. And that fear, it's not just survival, it's control. It shapes the way you move, the way you think. It rewires your brain until you're not even avoiding punishment anymore. You're avoiding attention. You're folding yourself smaller and smaller just to avoid being noticed. And the worst part is when you stop feeling anything at all while it's happening, when the crack of the whip becomes background noise, when the screams don't even make you blink because you've learned that caring too much gets you killed. That sympathy is a crack in the armor, and down here, armor is all you have. And you think about the people who used to fight back, the ones who yelled, who begged, who tried to reason, and you realize you haven't seen any of them in a long time because those are the ones the system grinds down fastest, the ones it notices too soon and silences too efficiently. And now you're just like the rest of them, flinching, before the sound, holding your breath until the tension passes and telling yourself you're safe because the blow wasn't yours this time. You learn fast that pain here isn't private. It's public. It's performative. It's how the system speaks when words stop working, which they always do, because nobody down here listens to words. Not when fear is louder, and so everything becomes a message. Every broken nose, every swollen eye, every body left slumped against the wall for hours before someone drags it away, and nobody says anything. Not out loud, not unless they want to be next, because punishment isn't just about correction. It's spectacle, a show, a warning, a way of reminding everyone else. What happens when you forget your place? And your place is at the bottom, pressed into the dirt beneath the whip, beneath the quota, beneath the weight of everything. And they make sure you remember that because control doesn't survive on strength alone. It needs theater. And the mine is full of stages, full of little corners, where the overseers turn someone into an example just to fill their own silence with something louder than dread. And sometimes they don't even bother with the whip. Sometimes they use their fists, their boots, a rusted iron bar that shouldn't even be here. And no one stops them. No one even blinks because interference is a suicide pact. And you can't help anyone if you're bleeding on the floor next to them, so you pretend you didn't hear it, didn't see it, didn't feel the way the air snapped around the impact, and the person who's hurt. If they're still breathing, they won't look at you either, won't ask for help, because they know the rules too. They know that pain is a solo act and mercy is ammunition in the wrong hands. And maybe the worst part is how efficient it all becomes, how smoothly it works, how the fear manages the flow of labor better than any chain ever could. Because when you're afraid, truly afraid, you self-regulate, you correct yourself before anyone else needs to. You move faster, quieter, cleaner. You don't ask questions, don't take risks, don't speak unless spoken to. And even then, you choose your words like they might explode, and they might. And you're not alone in this because everyone is doing the same calculus, the same mental math to stay beneath the threshold of attention, to stay somewhere between invisible and indispensable. And you start seeing it in their posture, the way their bodies curl inward, the way they keep their hands close, their heads low as if folding small enough might make them disappear altogether. And maybe that's what survival means now. Not strength or defiance, but disappearance becoming a shadow in the background of someone else's punishment. And you hate it, you do, but you also need it, because you've seen what happens to the ones who stand up, who speak out, who push back. And it's not just the beatings or the solitary pits or the work with no rest. It's the way their stories end early, the way their faces vanish from memory faster than the blood dries on the floor. Because the mind doesn't just erase people physically, it erases the idea that they were ever anything but a cautionary tale. And when someone new gets dragged in, eyes still wide, mouth still full of fight, you don't envy them, you don't respect them, you pity them, because they don't know yet that courage down here isn't noble, it's fatal. There's something twisted about how quickly violence becomes part of the architecture, how it settles into the stone and the routine and the air, how the echoes of it outlast the bruises and become just another sound in the mind's endless chorus pickaxes, striking rock carts, grinding over gravel, moans pressed into the background like a bass line. And every so often, a scream sharp enough to remind you that people are still breakable. That pain hasn't gone out of style, and the mind doesn't just tolerate cruelty. It runs on it, feeds off it, schedules it like a shift, and nobody questions it because what's the alternative? Compassion, fairness. Someone raising a hand and saying this isn't right. You've seen how that plays out. And not just in theory, you've watched it happen in real time. Like the man who spoke up when a younger kid passed out from hunger and got left there like a sack of waste. The man didn't yell, didn't throw a punch, didn't do anything dramatic. He just asked if someone could help carry the kid out of the tunnel, just asked. And that was all it took. One question, one moment of humanity, and they beat him for 10 minutes straight in front of everyone. Didn't even bother moving him first. And when they were done, they left him there too, next to the kid who never woke up. And you remember the silence afterward, thick and sour. Nobody moving, nobody daring to look at the body or the blood or the overseer's smug, wine-puffed face. And in that moment, something snapped in you. Not loudly, not like glass shattering, more like a rope, quietly fraying one thread at a time. And you realize that this place isn't just trying to kill your body. It's trying to kill your memory of being anything other than afraid. Because if you forget what kindness is, you stop expecting it. And if you stop expecting it, you stop wanting it. And then you're easier to manage. And the ones who can't let go of it, the ones who still reach out when someone falls or offer a crust of their own ration, or whisper a joke in the dark to keep someone else from crying. Those are the ones who disappear fastest. Not because they're weak, but because they make the rest of you remember that you weren't always like this. And that's dangerous because memory makes you human, and humanity makes you hesitate, and hesitation gets you killed. And so you stop hesitating, you stop remembering, you stop caring. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because the alternative is unbearable. And even though the violence still burns, still makes you sick when it's your turn, or when it's someone close. You learn to file it away, to treat it like weather, like an inevitable part of the environment. Because you can't fight the storm when you're part of the debris, and sometimes late at night when you're curled in the sleeping pit, with your knees to your chest and your skin still stinging from whatever reminder they gave you that day. You wonder how much of you is left, how much is still your own, and how much has been carved out and replaced with compliance and silence, and the ability to watch someone scream and feel absolutely nothing. You stop thinking of people as people after a while, not because you want to, not because you're cruel or callous or born broken, but because it's easier, safer, cleaner to turn them into background noise, into moving shapes with the same blank expressions and scabbed hands and hollow eyes you see in your own reflection when the water sits still long enough. And it's not personal, not even when someone you used to talk to, used to eat beside, used to share breath with, in the dark starts coughing blood and shrinks into the corner like they're trying to vanish because you know what comes next and there's nothing you can do about it. No word, no gesture, no amount of compassion that'll change the outcome. And so you shut it down, that human part of your brain that wants to reach out, wants to comfort, because comfort here is poison. It marks you, makes you visible, vulnerable, and that gets you dragged out with them. When they stop standing, and you've seen it happen more times than you can count. Someone touches a dying man's shoulder and ends up next in line for the pit. So now you don't ask names anymore, don't keep track of faces, you just memorize voices and patterns, who snores, who prays, who mutters numbers in their sleep. And it's strange how quickly you can forget someone who used to matter. How grief shrinks down into a blink, into a momentary stillness in the tunnel, before the overseer shouts again, and everyone moves like nothing happened, because nothing did not officially, not according to the scrolls and ledgers they keep upstairs, and that's the brutal truth. People vanish here quietly, constantly, and the machine never even stutters. It just absorbs the loss, grinds forward, and pulls the next warm body into place. And even the ones who don't die, who don't collapse, or get beaten or disappear, they change, and not in the way that makes for a good story or redemption arc. They change in small, painful ways, the kind you don't notice until it's too late, until the guy who used to whisper jokes at night hasn't smiled in a week, until the girl who used to barter for scraps now eats alone, silent and wide-eyed like a deer caught in the breath of a predator, until you realize you haven't heard anyone laugh. Not really laugh in weeks, because joy feels obscene down here, like an insult to the dead and dying. And what you're left with instead is a network of coexistence. Not community, just proximity, a dance of survival, where nobody steps too close. Nobody leans too hard, because trust here is fragile and betrayal is currency. And even the people you think you like, the ones you huddle near on colder nights, the ones who nod when you pass and share their water. When you're coughing, those people will sell you out if the price is right. And you don't blame them. Not really. Because if someone offered you a clean blanket and a full bowl in exchange for someone else's secrets, you're not sure you'd say no anymore. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. Not the pain, not the fear, not even the dying, but the fact that slowly, piece by piece, you are becoming someone you wouldn't have recognized. When this started, someone who looks at a friend struggling and thinks better them than me, there's no such thing as love down here. Not really. Not in the way you remember it. Not in the soft, warm, voluntary sense. Because this place grinds everything into survival strips. Every emotion down to its most desperate function. And even affection becomes a transaction. Even tenderness becomes a liability. And still somehow people cling to scraps of it, like they're trying to smuggle something human into a system, built to erase them. And maybe that's foolish. Maybe it's brave, maybe it's both. But you see it sometimes in the smallest ways, in how someone might share a scrap of food when they think no one's watching, or how one person might shift their body to shield another from a blow. Not because they're trying to be a hero, but because they can't help it, because some muscle memory deeper than fear tells them to protect what little warmth they've managed to hold on to. And it doesn't last. It never does, because the mind doesn't allow connection, not without consequences. And when people get too close, someone always notices, and that's when the tests start, the engineered punishments designed to break the bond, a lopsided assignment, an impossible quota, a night without rations for one, but not the other. And you're forced to choose not overtly, not with a question and a clock, but with the kind of slow creeping pressure that makes every moment a calculation, every word a risk. And it works. It always works, because eventually one of you starts pulling away, or worse, you don't. And then the overseers step in and make the decision for you. And the worst part is, they don't even kill them. Not always. Sometimes they just take them away quietly. And when you ask where they went, the answer is a shrug or a lie or a smirk. And either way, they don't come back. And you're left with the hollow ache of absence. Not grief exactly. Not even loss, just absence. Like a limb you forgot you had suddenly missing, and you try to move on. Try to fill the space with work and routine and the numb repetition that passes for normal down here. But it doesn't quite settle, doesn't quite stitch closed, and you find yourself avoiding the spots where they used to sit, pretending you don't hear their name when someone mutters it in their sleep. And the fear sharpens, because now you know for sure that nothing is safe here, not even the things you thought couldn't be taken from you. And maybe that's the final lesson, the one nobody says out loud. But everyone learns eventually that love here isn't just dangerous, it's disposable. And when it goes, it doesn't break you all at once. It just leaks out of you slowly, like everything else, until the only thing left is the memory of what it used to feel like. And even that starts to fade, and you stop reaching for people. Not because you don't want to, but because you can't afford the weight of another name you'll have to forget. Sometimes you catch yourself missing people you barely knew, not the ones who were closest to you, not the ones who made the days bearable, or shared the last sip of water, or whispered curses about the guards under their breath to make you laugh, but the others, the ones who passed through your orbit for a week, maybe a month, maybe less, and then vanished, leaving behind nothing but an empty spot in the tunnel, or an extra ration no one wants to touch. And it's not that they mattered to you, not really. It's that you remember the shape of them, the rhythm they brought to the chaos, the way they filled space with something that wasn't just suffering. And when they're gone, it feels like the whole place shifts a little, like the air tightens, like the walls are reminding you not to get too used to anyone. And at first you tell yourself it doesn't affect you. You tell yourself you didn't care. You tell yourself it's easier that way. But then one night, when the work is done and the pain is low enough that you can almost think you close your eyes, and their voice echoes in your head, or their walk, or the way they used to hum under their breath while they worked, and it hits you, not like a punch, not like a crack of the whip, but like a slow, cold flood rising through your chest that you didn't even get to say goodbye. And that's the part that breaks you. Not the loss, but the lack of closure, the way nothing here ends cleanly. Everything just fades, disappears, gets swallowed by the mind, and you're left pretending it didn't matter. And the truth is, you've gotten so good at pretending. You almost believe it almost, but not quite. And there's always that moment just before sleep, or just after waking, when you remember their name, or the way they laughed, or how they flinched when someone shouted. And for a second, they feel real again. And then you remember they're gone, and you have to pack that memory up, bury it. Pretend you didn't just feel something, because feeling here is dangerous. It's weakness. It's an open wound waiting for a boot, and you've already got enough of those, and you think about what it would take to make a connection again, to open yourself up to someone new to risk caring when everything around you is built to punish it. And the math never works out. The cost is always higher than the return. And so you keep your head down, your mouth shut, your heart folded in half and locked behind your ribs, and you become the version of yourself that they can't hurt. The version that doesn't remember birthdays or last names, or the way someone once wrapped a rag around your hand when you split it open on the cart rail. And maybe that's survival. Maybe that's just another form of death. But either way, it's the only way forward. And so you walk it one blistered step at a time, telling yourself you're strong, telling yourself you're smart, telling yourself that the ones who vanished never existed at all. Night doesn't fall down here so much as it thickens, like the dark is pressing harder against your skin, sinking into your lungs, settling in your bones. And even though there's no sky, no moon, no stars to mark the passage of time, you feel it. The slow, suffocating crawl into stillness. Not rest, because rest implies relief. Sleep implies peace. And there's none of that here. Not in the sleeping pit where bodies are stacked like firewood, where heat clings to skin, not out of comfort, but necessity, where the air turns sour and wet and filled with the quiet sounds of people trying not to cry, not to cough, not to scream in their sleep. And the hardest part isn't the pain or the hunger or the cold. It's the silence. The silence that creeps in when the overseers stop yelling and the cart stops squealing and the pickaxes finally go still. Because that's when your thoughts get loud. That's when your body stops moving long enough to notice how bad it actually hurts. That's when the ghosts show up. Not the dead ones. They don't haunt you. They're lucky. But the living ones. The yous you used to be, the yous who had names and birthdays and favorite colors. The you who believed in mornings and coffee and warm sheets. And they sit next to you in the dark. Those ghosts. And they don't speak because they don't have to. They just look at you with eyes that haven't seen what you've seen. And they wait. And some nights you pretend they're still real, still part of you. But most nights you turn your back on them. Curl up tighter, shove your face into the crook of your arm to keep the air out, the smell out, the memory out. And you try to sleep. Not because you're tired, but because sleep is the only time you leave this place. Even if just for a minute. Even if it's just into some feverish dream where you're running or floating or falling into something that isn't stone and screaming and stale breath. And on the nights when the dreams don't come, or worse when they do, and they're worse than the waking, you stare at the wall inches from your face and count the seconds between drips, between snores, between the muffled sobs of someone breaking 2 rows away. And you tell yourself that morning is coming. That the shift bell will ring soon, that the pain of standing will feel better than the pain of remembering. Because the work dulls everything, and dullness is the closest thing to mercy you've got. And you don't cry, not anymore, not really, because crying draws attention, and you've trained yourself too well for that, but your chest still gets tight, your throat still locks up. And sometimes when you think no one's listening, you whisper things, words that don't mean anything. Sounds you barely recognize, and maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's madness. Maybe it's just the leftover noise of who you used to be leaking out of your mouth before the mind scrapes it clean again. And eventually your body gives out, not into sleep, but into unconsciousness, a kind of blackout that feels more like death than rest. And that's what night is here, a pause, not a reprieve, a cold, breathless countdown to another morning you'll wish never came. Sometimes the pit feels quieter than it should, like the silence has taken on shape, like it's grown teeth, and you lie there in the dark with your eyes open, even though there's nothing to see, trying not to breathe too loud, trying not to move too much, because every shift, every twitch risks waking someone who might already be dreaming of something better or worse. dreaming of nothing at all. And you don't want to be the reason they come back to this. Not again. Not if they manage to escape for even a few precious minutes into that strange space where pain dulls and the mind disappears, and maybe, just maybe, they're somewhere else. And maybe someone is holding them or calling their name, or just letting them sit without the weight of labor pressing into every cell of their body. But you're not that lucky. You haven't been for a long time. And your dreams, when they come, don't take you away. They drag you deeper into versions of the mind that make the real one seem generous, into tunnels that twist and spiral and trap you in loops where your hands bleed but never stop moving, and your lungs scream but never get air. And when you wake, and you always do, it's with your heart pounding and your mouth dry and your body locked in a position you don't remember curling into, surrounded by the heat and stink of a dozen other humans trying to pretend they're not dying inch by inch. And you don't know what time it is. You never know what time it is. You just know the shift bell hasn't rung yet, and your stomach is turning, and your head feels heavy. And you start to wonder if you slept at all, or if you just blacked out between states of discomfort. And sometimes you hear things in the dark, things that don't belong to sleep, or the money things that scuff along the stone or rattle just out of reach. And you tell yourself it's nothing. It's the rats, it's the wind, it's the echoes of footsteps in a place that doesn't echo right. But your skin prickles anyway, your breath catches anyway, and you remember the stories whispered by those who've been here too long. Stories about the ones who never adjusted, who wandered off during the night, who spoke to things no one else could see. And you wonder how close you are to becoming one of them. How many nights it takes before the mind carves out enough of you that there's space for something else to crawl in. Something older than stone and hungrier than the guards. And you try to shake the thought, try to anchor yourself to something real. But everything that used to ground you is gone. Names, dates, memories. They don't matter here. And you can't even remember the last time you heard your own voice out loud. And maybe that's what the mind wants. Maybe it doesn't just want your body or your labor. Maybe it wants your narrative, your sense of sequence, your grip on time. So you become just another piece of it, a living thread in a tapestry of suffering so dense, no light gets through. And when you finally start to drift again, it's not into sleep. It's into a grey haze like sinking underwater, where thoughts blur and the ceiling above you presses down like it knows your name. And just before you go under, you wonder quietly, pointlessly, if this time you'll wake up different or not at all. You wake up and you're not sure if you slept, or if your body just gave up and collapsed into a temporary coma, because everything hurts in the same places it did before. And there's no sense of having rested, just a faint awareness that time passed while you weren't looking. And the worst part is that you were dreaming. Not the kind that gives you hope or offers a glimpse of escape, but the kind that mirrors this place so perfectly you have to blink a dozen times to confirm you're not still in it. And maybe you are. Maybe the dream and the day have finally blurred together so tightly that your brain can't tell the difference anymore. And around you the others are starting to stir slow and stiff, peeling themselves off the stone like their bodies forgot how to move during the few hours of not working. And no one speaks because there's nothing left to say, because mornings don't begin here. They just resume like someone pressed pause on your torment and is now casually pressing play again. And your mouth tastes like copper, and your tongue is thick and cracked, and you'd give anything for water, real water. Not the kind that's handed out in grimy scoops, or that you scrape off walls with the edge of a spoon, but cold, clear water that doesn't come with risk or floaters or the taste of rot. And the thought hits you so hard it almost makes you cry, not because of the water itself, but because of how far you've fallen, how easily your soul has reshaped itself around the idea that something so basic is now a fantasy. And you shift to sit up spine-popping like dry wood and stretch just enough to test whether anything tore in the night. and you hear the shuffle of feet, the creak of tired joints, the muted coughs that mean someone else is too far gone to recover, but will still be dragged out to work anyway, because dead weight still owes labor. And there's a rustle near the far wall, where someone's vomiting quietly into a crack in the floor. Nothing violent or dramatic, just a quiet surrender, like their stomach finally realized it's been tricked for too long and still no one speaks, because voices are too expensive this early. And when the bell finally clangs dull and sour and soaked in inevitability, it doesn't surprise you, doesn't even startle you. It just confirms what you already knew. The night didn't save you, the morning didn't forgive you, and the mine is still here waiting. And you force yourself to stand, because if you don't stand now, you never will. And if you never do again, you won't be the first or the last, and your legs wobble. But they hold barely, and you press your hand to the wall to steady yourself. And the cold of the stone seeps into your skin like a warning. And somewhere behind you, someone mutters a prayer. You've heard 100 times but still can't translate. And you wonder if it matters, if any of it matters, if the gods, whichever ones are still listening, care at all about the half-dead groveling underground, while the world moves on above them, like none of this exists. And you think about screaming. Not from pain, not from fear, but just to hear something break, to make a noise loud enough to punch a hole through the quiet. But you don't, because you need your voice for begging later. And besides, no one would listen, not really. They'd just glance your way and wonder if you were next, and then they'd look away. And so you stay quiet, and you follow the others out, because routine is stronger than rebellion. And sometimes just surviving the night feels like a betrayal you don't know how to live with. There's a moment right before you step back into the shaft, when the weight of it all pauses just long enough for you to notice it. Not the physical weight that never leaves, but the other one. The one that drags behind your ribs and pulls behind your eyes. The one that asks quietly, steadily, if maybe today is the day your body stops playing along. And it's not a loud thought, not a dramatic collapse into despair. It's just a soft suggestion that maybe this is as far as you were meant to go. And you stand there, toes hovering at the edge of the tunnel, mouth watching the others shuffle forward with the same dead rhythm. And you wonder what it would take to step away instead, to refuse to just sit down and let the mind pass by without you for once. And it's not rebellion, not even defiance. It's weariness in its purest form, but even that's dangerous. Even that small hesitation can get you noticed. And getting noticed is the worst thing that can happen here. Worse than pain, worse than hunger. Because attention comes with consequences. And so you take the step, just like you always do. And the dark swallows you again. Like it's been waiting. Like it's relieved. You didn't resist. And the air is thicker than it was yesterday. Or maybe you're just breathing harder, and every sound feels louder, closer, like the tunnel has grown tighter. Overnight, closing in, becoming a throat instead of a passage. And you're the breath trying to pass through without choking. And you get to your station, and your hands remember the motions before your mind does. And the pickaxe rises and falls, and the hours blur. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, someone screams not a word, just a sound. And nobody flinches because it happens, because pain is part of the rhythm. And you keep working, and your muscles burn, and your spine howls, and your fingers go numb. But you keep working, because not working means something worse. And when the bell rings again, to mark the end of the shift, you barely register it. You just follow the line back through the tunnel, back toward the pit, back toward what passes for night, and your feet drag. But your will drags harder, pulling you along like a stubborn mule you forgot how to argue with, and the air shifts again, colder now, sharper, like something just breathed out right next to your neck, and you don't turn around. You never turn around, because looking back in the mine is like inviting it in, like giving it permission to show you something you're not ready to understand, and so you walk faster, head down, mouth shut. And when you finally reach the sleeping pit again and sink into the same corner of the same stone floor, your knees crack and your back folds and your eyes burn, but your face doesn't move and your chest rises barely, and you tell yourself you made it through another day, but the word through feels wrong too. Optimistic, because you didn't pass through anything. You stayed exactly where you were, deeper in, heavier, quieter, and the only thing that changed was the position of the sun somewhere above you, unseen, unconcerned, and you lie down, curl into yourself, press your cheek to the rock like maybe it'll remember your name even if nobody else does. And as your eyelids start to fall, you wonder what the point of remembering is anyway, what legacy looks like when your bones dissolve into dust in a place that records nothing but weight and silence. And the last thing you hear before slipping under is the soft, rhythmic drip of water from the ceiling, keeping time like a clock that only counts suffering. You don't dream anymore, or if you do, you don't remember it, and maybe that's a blessing. Maybe your brain finally got tired of replaying pain in higher resolution, because now, when the darkness comes, it's not filled with images or voices or flashes of the life you used to have. It's just absence, like floating face down in cold water, numb and quiet, and barely aware you exist. And when the bell rings, it doesn't feel like waking. It feels like surfacing into a world you never left, a cycle that didn't pause while you were unconscious, and your eyes open and your body moves. But it's not really you doing it. It's the version of you that belongs to the mind, the one stitched together from muscle memory and hunger and fear. And your first breath tastes like mold and iron and old sweat. And the second one hurts more because now your ribs are awake and you sit up slowly. Because if you move too fast, something might snap. And the others around you do the same, all of you creaking to life like rusted gears in a machine that doesn't need oil, because it thrives on friction. And there's a strange stillness in the pit today, like something unspoken has settled in, like everyone's too tired even to pretend they're okay. And you recognize that feeling. You've felt it for days, maybe weeks. That edge of the end sensation where everything feels stretched too thin, and even blinking feels like a commitment. And maybe the mind feels it too, because the walls are quieter, the air heavier, the tunnels darker. And when you shuffle into line with the others and start the long walk toward your shaft, your feet drag a little more, your shoulders sag a little lower, and nobody tells you to straighten up or move faster, because even the guards seem subdued, like they know something's coming but haven't figured out how to brace for it. And you get to your station and lift your pickaxe, and the sound it makes when it hits the wall is duller, flatter, like the rock's just as tired as you are. And you chip and swing and sweat, and your fingers blister anew over old wounds that never close properly. And time passes, or maybe it doesn't, because down here it's all one long grey moment, broken by bells and bruises and the occasional reminder that you're not a corpse yet. And someone collapses, mid-swing a few feet from you, just folds in half and hits the ground with a thud that makes your stomach twist. And no one moves at first, no one speaks. And then someone drags him to the side out of the way, and work resumes like nothing happened, and the blood he left behind soaks slowly into the dirt like a receipt. And you wonder what he was thinking in the seconds before his body gave out, if he knew it was coming, if he welcomed it. And you don't feel scared, not exactly, just hollow, because part of you envies him. Part of you wonders if maybe that's the only way this ends. And if so, how much longer can you keep pretending you're not already halfway there? And as the hours crawl by, your vision blurs and your knees shake and the walls pulse like lungs around you. And you press your forehead against the stone for a second, just to cool it, just to rest. And you listen to the hum inside the rock low and constant, like the mind itself is whispering, and the message is always the same. You are nothing, you are replaceable, you are temporary, and yet here you are still breathing, still swinging, still waiting for something to change that never will. You don't remember when the day ends because down here there are no sunsets, no color shifts or fading shadows to mark the transition, just a sudden slowing of movement, a collective sag in every spine as if the mind itself exhaled and let you go for a few hours, and you drop your pickaxe, not because the bell rang, but because your hands stopped listening, your fingers uncurled on their own, like they decided they've had enough. And honestly, you don't blame them. And when the guards bark the final orders, they sound softer, not kinder, just more tired. Like even cruelty needs rest. And you walk the tunnel back with a gait that can't be called walking anymore. More of a drift, a slump, a guided collapse. And no one talks on the way back, not because you're not allowed, but because speech takes effort, and effort is a luxury now. Like memory, like hope. And when you reach the pit again, the same body heat and breath, thick air and sour dampness, welcome you like a blanket you never chose, but learn to accept, and you sink into the spot you always return to, not out of preference but out of pattern. And you lie there curled into yourself shoulder to shoulder with someone whose name you forgot or never knew. And you feel your body shake, not from cold exactly, but from the slow unraveling of tension that kept you upright for 16 hours straight, and the aches pulse through your joints like echoes of invisible hammers, and you close your eyes not to sleep yet, but to reduce the world down to nothing, because nothing is peaceful, nothing is light. And as your breath slows, you listen to the soft rustling of limbs adjusting the occasional cough, swallowed quickly so it doesn't wake anyone, and the deep, low rumble of someone muttering a prayer that might be real or might just be habit. And for a fleeting moment, you think about the world above the sky, the breeze, the way a bed feels when it isn't made of rock, the way silence sounds when it isn't filled with fear, and you don't dwell there long because longing hurts worse than wounds, and you already have too many of both. But you let yourself imagine what it would feel like to be clean, to be warm, to drink water that doesn't taste like iron. And that's enough not to save you, but to soften the edges of the dark, and eventually sleep comes, not quickly, not kindly, but it comes wrapping itself around your aching frame like a fog. And as your thoughts slip away one by one, you feel yourself fading from this place, even if just for a little while. And before everything goes quiet, a soft voice mind whispers that you made it, that even in the worst place you endured another day. And that's no small thing, so rest now, really rest. Let the night carry you to a safer place. Let your breath slow, let your mind loosen its grip. And when morning comes, not this morning, not the one down here but yours, the real one where light filters through your window, and the air smells like coffee or fresh laundry, or just peace. Remember that you're not in the mind, not really, not anymore, and tomorrow will be better. It will be bright and full of learning and growth and small joys you've maybe taken for granted, but now get to rediscover. So take a deep breath. Feel the weight of your body in a soft bed. Feel the freedom of knowing you are safe, and sleep well, because you've earned it, and because tomorrow is going to be a good day.